Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Rush Hour came out in September 1998, and nobody at Warner Brothers knew what they had. The studio was nervous. They had a Hong Kong action star who barely spoke conversational English paired with a stand-up comedian who had never carried a major film. The budget was $33 million, which in 1998 was not small. But it was not the kind of money studios throw at a guaranteed hit. It was the kind of money they throw at a calculated risk. The film opened at number 1, held that spot for 3 consecutive weeks, and earned $244 million worldwide. It launched one of the most beloved buddy cop franchises in Hollywood history, turned Chris Tucker into one of the highest paid actors in the world, and gave Jackie Chan his first real American crossover success after years of trying. But behind all of that are 21 facts that most fans have never heard. The real stories from the set, the decisions that almost killed the project, the moments of chaos that ended up in the final cut, and the details about what each man actually thought of the other when the cameras were not rolling. This is the part of Rush Hour that never made the press tour. Number 1. Chris Tucker was not the first choice for Detective James Carter. The role was offered to multiple comedians before Tucker's name came up, and at least 2 turned it down. A film with 2 non-white leads in a comedy-action hybrid was considered a financial risk that studios had trouble marketing to what they called the broadest possible audience. Tucker himself was not a proven box office draw at the time. He had supporting work in Friday and a lead role in The Fifth Element, but neither film had established him as someone audiences would show up specifically to see. Brett Ratner pushed hard for Tucker because he believed Tucker's energy was unlike anything else available in that casting pool. Tucker could talk faster than almost any other performer in Hollywood. He could improvise, and he had a physical commitment to comedy that translated to action sequences in a way that pure stand-ups rarely can. The studio eventually agreed, but they negotiated Tucker's salary down to $3 million. That number matters because of what came later. Number 2. Jackie Chan earned significantly less than $3 million for the original Rush Hour. Multiple accounts from people connected to the production place his initial fee well below Tucker's, a dynamic that both men have acknowledged in separate interviews. Chan was the bigger international star by any objective measure in 1998. His films had been massive in Asia and Europe for over a decade. He had a dedicated cult following in the United States that had been building since the early 80s. But in terms of proven American commercial performance, Tucker was considered the safer domestic bet because his comedy was rooted in African-American cultural references that played to a core domestic audience. The studio's math was based entirely on projected domestic returns. Chan accepted the lower fee because he understood that breaking into the American mainstream required a different kind of investment. He had tried and failed to break through with American productions before, and he knew a successful American film would change everything. He was right. By Rush Hour 2, the pay structure looked nothing like the original deal. Number 3. Jackie Chan performed the majority of his own stunts in Rush Hour, which sounds like a typical Jackie Chan fact until you understand what that actually meant on an American production. In Hong Kong, Chan's stunt philosophy was total control. He designed the sequences, rehearsed them hundreds of times, shot them himself, and expected the same commitment from everyone around him. American productions operate on tight insurance liability protocols. Studios do not allow principal actors to take genuine physical risks because an injury shuts down production and costs millions. Chan found the American stunt system deeply frustrating. He was used to doing things American coordinators considered genuinely dangerous, and the constant back and forth over what he was allowed to attempt added friction to an already complex shoot. The compromise was that Chan got to do more than a typical American studio would permit, but less than he would have done in Hong Kong. He has said in interviews that some of the Rush Hour action sequences felt slow and safe to him compared to his Hong Kong work. The American audiences watching had no such frame of reference and were stunned anyway. Number 4. Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan could not communicate clearly for the first several days of filming. This is not a language barrier joke. It is a documented production reality. Chan's English in 1998 was functional but limited, particularly when it came to understanding rapid American slang, Tucker's specific comedic cadence, and the improvised riffing that Tucker naturally fell into between takes. Tucker drops cultural references, regional slang, and comedic callbacks at a pace that confuses even fluent English speakers unfamiliar with that specific register of African American vernacular. Chan would nod and smile during Tucker's longer improvised stretches while privately having very little idea what Tucker had just said. What the cameras captured as chemistry was in part genuine affection, and in part two professionals committing to a performance dynamic neither could fully decode in real time. The chemistry became real as the shoot progressed, and they found ways to communicate that bypassed the language gaps. By the end of production, they had developed something that neither had planned for. Number 5, the line that became the most quoted in the film was improvised. The moment where Carter turns to Lee and asks whether he understands the words coming out of his mouth was not in the original screenplay in that form. Tucker was known during production for pushing beyond scripted dialogue during takes, and Ratner gave him significant latitude to do so because the improvisations were often sharper than what was on the page. Chan had to react to lines he was hearing for the first time, which meant his responses in those moments were genuine rather than rehearsed. Film analysts have pointed to this dynamic as part of why the chemistry reads as authentic, because in many of those scenes, Chan's confusion or amusement is a real-time response, not an acted one. The line itself became a cultural touchstone in the late 90s, showing up on merchandise, in parodies, in other films, and in everyday American conversation in a way that screenwriters almost never achieve intentionally. The fact that it was not written makes it more remarkable, not less. Number 6. Brett Ratner was 28 years old when he directed Rush Hour. He had one previous feature film to his name, the 1997 film Money Talks, which had performed modestly. Giving a 28-year-old director a $33 million studio picture with 2 difficult leads, a complex action comedy tone requirement, and significant studio oversight was not standard practice at Warner Brothers. Ratner got the job through persistence and a specific pitch about the Tucker and Chan dynamic. The age gap between him and the executives, second-guessing his decisions, created ongoing tension. There were multiple points where studio interference threatened to reshape the film in ways Ratner was fighting against. The editing process was particularly contentious. Ratner wanted a faster cut than the studio initially pushed for, and the final pacing that audiences responded to reflects his instincts rather than the studio's early preferences. He was right about the film, and the studio eventually acknowledged it, but the process of getting there was not smooth. Number 7. The film's production designer worked with Ratner to capture a specific version of Los Angeles that was tied directly to the African American cultural landscape of the late 90s. This was a conscious creative decision, not an accident of location scouting. The Crenshaw area, the specific look of certain interiors, the choices about where Carter lived and how he moved through the city. All of these were deliberate. The audience being marketed to was accustomed to being either ignored by mainstream action films or reduced to supporting roles. Rush Hour offered something different, a full black co-lead whose cultural world was treated as worthy of the camera, not a sidekick in service of a white protagonist. The marketing leaned into this hard, and it paid off in opening weekend numbers that confirmed what Ratner and Tucker had been arguing during production. The audience was there, and they had been waiting. Number 8. Jackie Chan spent significant time before and during production learning about African American culture because he understood that his own cultural references would not translate and that he needed to understand Tucker's frame of reference to respond to it authentically on screen. Chan is a filmmaker in the complete sense, not just a performer, but someone who researches every element of the context he is working in. He watched films, listened to music, asked Tucker directly about references he did not understand, and paid attention to the cultural temperature of the environment he was working in. Tucker, for his part, became genuinely interested in Chan's background, in Hong Kong action cinema, in Chan's history as a performer, and in the specifics of how Chan approached physical comedy. The mutual education that happened during production deepened into a genuine friendship that both men have maintained for decades. Number 9. The outtake reel that plays over the end credits became one of the most beloved elements of the entire Rush Hour franchise. It was not originally planned as a franchise element. It was included because Ratner had accumulated so much funny footage of genuine accidents, missed cues, Chan's physical mistakes, and Tucker breaking down laughing that he could not leave it on the cutting room floor. The response from test audiences was overwhelming enough that the decision was made to include the reel as part of the theatrical experience. When Rush Hour 2 came out and included its own outtake reel over the credits, audiences stayed in their seats until the lights came up, which is not normal theatrical behavior. The tradition became an expectation. Fans who had seen Rush Hour in theaters specifically mentioned the outtake reel as a reason they wanted to see the sequels. It created a feedback loop where part of the film's value proposition was watching Jackie Chan fall down and Chris Tucker laugh at him for 4 minutes. No studio planned for that outcome or would have put it there intentionally. Number 10. Chris Tucker's laugh in the film is not his natural laugh. This is a detail that Tucker has confirmed in interviews and that audio professionals who have worked with him have noted separately. Tucker developed a specific performance laugh for Carter, higher in pitch, more explosive, longer in duration than his actual resting laugh. The choice was deliberate. Carter needed to be a specific kind of loud, and Tucker calibrated his physical performance to match a character who takes up space in every room he enters. The performance laugh became so associated with Tucker specifically that it was mimicked in playgrounds and classrooms and office spaces across the country for years after the film came out. The chemistry audiences responded to was the product of a constructed performance, not simply Tucker being himself with a different name. The construction was so good, the distinction became invisible. Number 11. The film marked a turning point in how Hollywood understood the commercial potential of black-led action films that were not explicitly coded as urban dramas. The genre landscape in the late 90s had a narrow conception of what black films were allowed to be commercially. There was a category for hood films, a category for comedies rooted in black family dynamics, and a category for prestige dramas. Rush Hour did not fit cleanly into any of these. It was a big-budget action comedy with a black lead who was operating in an international thriller framework alongside a global martial arts star. The opening weekend proved the audience was broader than any internal projection. White suburban teenagers showed up alongside black urban audiences, alongside Asian American audiences who were there for Chan. The demographic spread was something the studio had not anticipated and could not explain. What it proved was that the narrowness of the category had been a failure of imagination, not a reflection of what audiences actually wanted. Number 12. The karaoke sequence in which Chris Tucker sings Edwin Starr's War is one of the most memorable scenes in the film, and it was nearly cut. Ratner had included it because he believed Tucker's full commitment to the performance. The dancing, the costume, the complete physical abandon was a showcase moment that audiences needed to see before the film shifted into its final act. Studio executives watching early cuts were not sure the scene earned its place. It stops the plot at a point where the story should be accelerating, a legitimate structural criticism. Ratner fought to keep it, arguing the scene told you everything about Carter in 1 minute and created audience affection that paid off in the climax. He was right. The scene became one of the most referenced moments from the film, and Tucker's performance in it was cited specifically in early reviews as evidence that he was a genuine movie star, not just a comedian who had gotten lucky with a role. Number 13. Jackie Chan has been publicly honest about the fact that he found American filmmaking inefficient and occasionally baffling compared to what he was used to in Hong Kong. On a Hong Kong production in that era, a stunt sequence might be filmed over many days with Chan directly controlling every element of the setup, the camera placement, the timing, and the editing logic. On Rush Hour, he was one participant in a much larger machine with union rules, strict shooting schedules, multiple camera setups, and a director with his own vision for how the action should be captured. The loss of control was genuinely difficult for Chan. He has described watching sequences being set up in ways he knew were wrong and having to decide whether to push back or let it go. His relationship with Ratner was good enough that he pushed back, and Ratner was usually willing to hear him. But the structural difference between Hong Kong and Hollywood production remained a source of friction throughout the shoot. Number 14. Rush Hour introduced millions of American viewers to Jackie Chan at a time when his Hong Kong filmography was essentially invisible to mainstream audiences. Rumble in the Bronx, which had been Chan's most successful American release before Rush Hour, had done solid business but had not penetrated deep into the cultural conversation the way Rush Hour did. The difference was the buddy dynamic. Rumble in the Bronx put Chan in an American setting but did not give him a character to play off who could translate his physical comedy into language American audiences understood. Tucker did that. Tucker could react to Chan in a way that told American viewers how to feel about what they were watching. When Tucker expressed awe, audiences felt awe. When Tucker expressed frustration, audiences laughed. Tucker was the interpreter, and his interpretation made Chan accessible in a way no previous American release had managed. That function is undervalued in film criticism and rarely credited in discussions of what made this pairing work. Number 15. The film's score was composed by Lalo Schifrin, who is best known for composing the Mission Impossible theme. Schifrin's involvement brought a level of musical sophistication to Rush Hour that distinguished it sonically from many buddy cop films of the era. His approach worked with both the action sequences and the comedy timing, which is a difficult balance. Music that works for physical comedy often undercuts genuine action tension and vice versa. Schifrin had enough experience with both to navigate the hybrid tone without forcing the audience into a fixed emotional register. His contributions are frequently overlooked in discussions about why Rush Hour works as well as it does, but they are audible throughout. The score communicates the film's tonal range before any actor speaks. Number 16. Tucker negotiated a substantially higher salary for Rush Hour 2, released in 2001. Reports at the time placed his fee at $20 million, which would have made him one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood for that film. The gap between his Rush Hour fee and his Rush Hour 2 fee represents one of the largest single sequel salary jumps in Hollywood history. It reflected not just the success of the first film, but Tucker's recognition that he had been underpaid relative to the value he brought to the franchise. The negotiation was reportedly aggressive, and Tucker's team came to the table with extensive box office data to support the ask. The studio paid it. Tucker had leverage that no one had expected him to have 3 years earlier, and he used it correctly. Number 17. The film features several practical stunt sequences that were genuinely dangerous for the performers involved. Not just Chan, but members of the supporting cast and the stunt team. There were injuries during production. Chan's own history of injuries, broken fingers, broken nose, cracked skull, dislocated pelvis across various productions, meant that he brought a very particular relationship with physical risk to the set, one where pain was a normal cost of doing business rather than a signal to stop. American productions are not set up for that relationship with risk. The safety protocols exist for liability reasons, and because studios learned from decades of stunt accidents that exceeding certain risk thresholds produces diminishing returns. Chan understood the protocols but found them conservative, relative to what he thought was necessary for the sequences to look right. Number 18. Chris Tucker took a long break from film after the Rush Hour franchise that surprised the industry and his own fans. After Rush Hour 3 in 2007, he largely stepped away from major studio productions for several years. The reasons he has given publicly include a desire for control over his image, dissatisfaction with the roles being offered, financial difficulties he has spoken about in interviews, and a period of spiritual reflection. The gap in his filmography after Rush Hour 3 is one of the more unusual career trajectories in Hollywood, given the scale of his success. When he returned to prominent public performance, it was through stand-up and select projects rather than through a return to action comedy. The absence made the Rush Hour films feel more singular in retrospect, not the beginning of a long Hollywood career, but a specific chapter that opened and closed. Number 19. The Rush Hour franchise helped establish a model for buddy cop films with leads from different cultural backgrounds that influenced how Hollywood approached similar pairings in subsequent years. The specific formula? Cultural friction as the source of both comedy and genuine tension, mutual respect built through shared danger, each character's worldview presented as equally valid rather than one serving as the default and the other as the deviation, was not invented by Rush Hour, but was executed with unusual consistency across the first two films in particular. Later productions that attempted similar pairings frequently cited Rush Hour as a reference point for both commercial strategy and character dynamics. The formula has been copied badly more often than it has been copied well, which is itself a measure of how difficult it is to make the specific version of it that Tucker and Chan produced look effortless. Number 20. Jackie Chan's use of physical objects in fight sequences, what film critics and action choreographers call environmental combat, reached American audiences for the first time in a genuinely wide release with Rush Hour. Chan's Hong Kong films had always featured this style of fighting, where ordinary objects become weapons or obstacles in ways that are simultaneously practical and comedic. A ladder, a shopping cart, a pool cue. The environment is never neutral in a Chan fight sequence. American action cinema of that era operated on a different logic, where fights were primarily about two bodies hitting each other and the environment was background. Chan's integration of the space around the fight into the fight itself was visually unlike anything mainstream American audiences had seen in a wide release, and the reaction was immediate. Rush Hour's action sequences generated word of mouth that went beyond standard positive reviews into genuine enthusiasm about a new way of watching a fight scene. Critics wrote specifically about Chan's use of space as something absent from American-wide releases before, and those reviews introduced new language to mainstream film conversation. Number 21. Rush Hour almost did not get a theatrical release. Warner Brothers was weighing a direct-to-video release or a limited run rather than a wide national rollout. The internal skepticism about whether the audience existed for a Tucker and Chan pairing was significant enough that a full theatrical release was never guaranteed. The decision to release it wide and to back it with a real marketing campaign was made relatively late and was based partly on test screening results that exceeded expectations. The audience that showed up for those test screenings were the audience that showed up opening weekend, and opening weekend was enough to answer every question the studio had been asking for the previous 2 years. Rush Hour opened at number 1 on a September weekend studios typically avoided. The timing was a risk, and so was everything else surrounding this film. That is the part of the story the box office gross doesn't tell you. That the film, which became a defining piece of American pop culture from the late 90s, almost did not reach the screen at all. And the people who believed in it spent those 2 production years being told, in various polite and impolite ways, that they were probably wrong. The audience showed up and proved every one of those doubts wrong. What the box office gross cannot tell you is how close it came to not existing at all. That is the Rush Hour story that has always belonged right next to the one everybody already knows.